Okay, Mark, you were just speaking at, inside the conference, and you were talking about the media. Tell us what brought that on?
Well, we've done a documentary about the Bundy standoff, which your viewers can go to our YouTube channel and Center for Self-Governance and watch the first 60 minutes of this docu-series we're calling Governed v. Governing. And what it's chronicling is it's chronicling this kind of collusion, if you will, or this connection between the media and law enforcement related to people being labeled certain things like right-wing, far-right, alt-right, domestic terrorist, domestic extremist, anti-government, anti-abortion, anti-immigration. I mean, there's a whole litany of these labels that are used to kind of categorize people like the Finicum family, in this case, Lavoy Finicum. And of course, Jeanette has had to endure the same thing. And so for the media that's in attendance at this conference, they're looking for the soundbite because they want to prove to their viewers that there is an extreme element in the United States that needs to be exterminated. That's it's just dangerous. Let's not even talk about property or healthcare rights. Let's put those on the table for right now. They're legitimate, so let's put it on the table, property versus healthcare rights. What does it look like in a country where you're able to label someone to the point you can get them killed?
With no due process.
With no due process. Again, like I said, property and healthcare rights, both legitimate discussions for debate. Put them on the table for a second, and let's just go to the labels. Domestic extremists on the verge of committing an act of domestic terrorism. Now, if the law enforcement their job is to protect us from domestic terrorists, well, then they've got to figure out, well, you know, Congress, media, who's a domestic terrorist in the United States? So they create a lexicon. That lexicon defines who those threats are. Lavoy Finicum's listed as one of those threats. Now, I don't know about you or your listeners or people from either side of the aisle. What is it, in the first picture you see in your head, what do you see? What do you imagine a terrorist looks like? For me, when I see terrorist in my head, I see someone storming the cockpit and flying the plane into the building where everyone on the plane has no choice, they're going to die.
9/11.
9/11.
Yes, 9/11.
Or somebody with a car running 84 people down in Italy, in France, and they had no choice. They were just there at the beach just to enjoy freedom of the beach, right? The wind and the noise of the crashing waves. And somebody gets a rental truck and runs 84 of them down and injures scores of people. That's what I see a terrorist as. But in our country where the media and the narrative and the label reigns, it's easy to paint the picture in the average person's mind that a domestic terrorist is something not even closely remote to what I just described.
Yeah, just for having a free thinking, the ability to think for oneself and express their own political beliefs. If it's contrary to what the media and the alt-left has to say, then we're considered terrorists because of what we feel and what we believe. And or what we say. We have First Amendment rights in this country to say what we believe in without being shot and killed.
And so the narrative starts to paint that. They try to narrow them into a box. So this is, a sovereign citizen. Sovereign citizen means, do you have a driver's license?
Yes, I do.
You have a social security number?
I do.
Do you have a passport?
I have one of those too.
Are you anti-government?
No.
Do you believe in the federal government?
I do.
Do you believe in the state government?
I absolutely do, and I believe there's clear lines between both.
And so
boundaries between both.
And so according to the FBI's own website, she doesn't fit the definition of sovereign citizen. And so, but the media would repeat it over and over again for her and her husband without the due process of being able to argue, I'm not one of those things, because the average American who's not going to the FBI's website to look up the label sovereign citizen, all they know is the media said bad.
And it's a form of conditioning and brainwashing for the American public who have no time to really do the research themselves. this is another reason why we're out doing this documentary and traveling the country, is because we want to try to share this message of who he really was, what he was standing for, and why he went to Malheur, because they're not going to get it on Wikipedia. They're not going to get it on Google. They're not going to get it from the independent news sources. I hope through some news source like yours. But we have very few voices like yours throughout this country. We need to start tapping into more independent, free-thinking, unbiased media like yourself.
And if we can, reach out to some of the media who are here that could change their minds to realize, wait a minute, I do have a social justice narrative that's biased by my upbringing and training, and I'm using these labels to what I believe is to get rid of extremism in America. How far are we willing to go in our country? Are we willing to go as far as the native Germans to exterminate the non-native Jews merely because they have political agenda? They use them as tools. Is that what we're going to do to the Finicum family, to the Bundy family, to my family,
to the Hammonds,
to your family? And so that's the reason why we talk the way we did in our talk.
When we give the pledge at some of our meetings, and a lot of meetings we say a prayer and we give the pledge, part of the pledge says liberty for all, right? For all, not a select few or the ones that are politically correct, for all. That's what this United States is about. It's for all the people.
For
now
everyone.
you're still preparing for the wrongful death lawsuit.
Yes.
And the trial recently for FBI agent Astorita, you sat every day during that trial.
I did.
And gave us some great updates on that. How has that trial affected your upcoming lawsuit? Can you talk about that?
Oh, I think that there is so much information that we gleaned from that 4 weeks sitting on those benches. It was well worth the time and the money that we had to expend in housing and my attorneys to be there to collect that information, because we would have spent a great deal trying to get transcripts. It would have been a lot more time. Now we're ahead of the game as far as I'm concerned. There was so much that came out that is so beneficial for the wrongful death. And what's really great about my particular civil case is I don't need 12 jurors to vote the same. It's a 51% in this civil case, and I believe that we have that. We have that, don't you? I mean, Oregon State Police and the FBI did not follow protocol time and time and time again. There is so much evidence of that, and it's documented. It's in transcripts, and we are very fortunate.
They've admitted an awful lot on it.
They have admitted an awful lot, and I'm waiting to see what else, because sitting there, one thing we did learn sitting there is that the prosecution did not ask the questions that they needed to ask. They stopped at certain points. My lawyer's sitting there, why don't you ask this, this, and this? Same with the defense. They had a narrative, they had a plan. They knew exactly what they wanted to let out and how much of it. And they knew how they wanted to paint my husband throughout the trial, because it wasn't a trial about the FBI agent, about lying. It was about Lavoy Finicum and whether he was armed and dangerous. Over and over and over again, from the judge down to almost every single one of those witnesses. We heard that over and over and over again. So it wasn't a trial about whether or not some officer was honest and whether he broke protocol, whether he obstructed justice. It was about demonizing my husband, Lavoy Finicum, in the eyes of the jurors, and getting it on record. But there was
now,
so much.
when are you due to go to see the courtroom with this case? When are you expected to go to trial?
We are in the process of motions to dismiss of all the defendants that are involved, and we should be done with that process around February. So we'll enter the discovery phase come February, and we'll start all those depositions and all of this discovery. I hear that there's a great deal of information, over 8 terabytes worth of stuff, and so we're collecting professionals, experts. This is part of the reason that I am doing all of this fundraising, because this is not a cheap venture. I don't have the purse of the government to help pay nilly-willy for whatever it is that I want to do. I have to go out and raise it, and I'm really grateful for Mark.
And that this tour is all about fundraising.
Yeah, and I was just going to say I'm grateful for the Center for Self-Governance for sacrificing everything that they are to travel with me everywhere and to present this accurate picture of who my husband was.
Yeah, so you'll see that the media, what they will do is they won't capture the truth. Matter of fact, right now they're all leaving, so they're not staying for the truth. What they've got is they're talking points. And they talk talking points are going to continue to portray the lynching. Well, they'll use the
They're going
labels.
for the 10 o'clock protest is what they're doing.
That's right.
They want the other side.
They want the other side. That's the agenda that they're going to push.
And they haven't seen anything about Lavoy Finicum either. They're just
Right.
mindless drones that are paid by whomever to go out and, rally and protest violently in some cases.
Yeah, and that's because it's not a fair and balanced media that's leaving right now. What it is, it's a media that has a political agenda. So they're not reporting on the truth. What they're doing is they're reporting on their narrative. And that's the point that we're trying to make,
Yeah.
is it can have the effect of getting somebody killed.
Does that matter to the media?
Are they okay with that? Isn't that a legitimate question to ask? Are we as a country okay with that? Are we okay with legitimizing the media using labels in their narrative that can ultimately get people like her husband killed without due process in a court of law with justice in our country, the way we've designed it?
Do you believe that your husband was committing an act of suicide?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He got out of that truck to protect that 18-year-old girl in the back seat. My youngest daughter was 17 and a half, living at home. I know he was thinking, I've got to protect this young lady, and I believe he got out to divert the attention onto himself, and he did. And unfortunately, the government and all of those agents that were participating in this murder, this kill stop, went on to fire indiscriminately many rounds into the truck afterwards, and that is horrendous. What did they do? No weapons were pulled. Nobody was firing at them. Nobody drew a weapon. Why this type of force? And if they want to use the excuse, which they have and will, if they want to use the excuse that they were non-lethal rounds, that's not good enough for me. That's not good enough for the American people, because we do not know whether they're lethal or non-lethal, right? How are we to know that? How are we to know that we are being fired upon with a non-lethal round, and therefore I shouldn't be scared, I shouldn't be afraid for my life, and I shouldn't think that they're just exerting and power and they're bullying. They're bullying.
Well, it's like the law enforcement, they tell you that there's a lot of toy guns with a little orange tip on them.
Well,
So if a real gun had an orange tip painted on them, are they not going to be afraid of it? They aren't going to be able to tell the difference, so there we go. That's the same kind of analogy, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Now, your husband never got his day in court, never got due process, but if he had not been killed that day, he would have been in the first round.
He would have been sitting there with Ammon and Cliven and Ryan and Neil and Jeff and Shauna and all of the others that were there. He would have been in that first round, and he would be home with me. And he would be home with our kids and our grandkids. He would be alive today.
He would have been one of the ones that were acquitted.
Found not guilty.
Yes, found not guilty.
Found not guilty.
Is there a difference on that term? Acquitted versus not guilty?
They're the same.
They're the same. I just want people to understand.
No, I get it, but I have a lot of attorneys tell me there's a difference between innocent and not guilty. There's a difference, they pick apart the words,
Yeah.
and words are important.
They are very important.
As you keep stressing. So that's why I was curious about that.
So in the Oregon case, which we're going to be doing a documentary coming out in 2019 on all of the court cases from Oregon, Nevada to the Asterita trial, her wrongful death. In the Oregon case, the main leaders, Ammon Bundy, for example, were acquitted, and the media had portrayed Lavoy as one of the leaders of the armed takeover of the Malheur Refuge. And so Lavoy would have been in the same courtroom and would have been acquitted for it. And what's important for your viewers, your audience to understand is that at the first traffic stop in Oregon, an FBI agent was issuing commands and the occupants of the vehicle were complying. The first compliance was Lavoy stopped. The second compliance is that their hands were on the outside of the doors with the windows down to show that their hands were not occupied with a weapon. And at that moment, an Oregon State police officer fired at their vehicle. And that's when things were escalated. So it's not Lavoy Finicum escalating anything. It was escalated by
Oregon State
a law enforcement officer who inadvertently shot at the vehicle or purposely, but either way it escalated things, and that's where you see That's where you see Jeanette Finicum saying, I'm going to go meet the sheriff in Grant County. You want to meet us there? We'll meet you there. Because it seems to me that they can make the case now that safety was an issue. They didn't trust them because why are you doing this in the middle of nowhere where there's no cell phone signals?
We've done nothing to warrant being shot at.
They've done nothing. There's no warrants for their arrest. They haven't been served trespass. There's nothing.
They haven't been threatening in any way.
Other than they have been labeled a domestic terrorist. And that's the key ingredient here. What did they do that was a terrorist threat? What was it? How is it different than ICE, the ICE building in Portland, being taken over by Antifa for more than 40 days? And the vile things, destroying it, the way the law enforcement was treated. I mean, I've watched video of these people trying to reach out to the FBI, reach out to the Harney County Sheriffs, to meet with them, to talk with them.
They shook hands with them.
They shook hands with them. They even went to their headquarters to meet with them. And so anyway, the facts are hard to comply. You have to put the puzzle pieces together. And our culture is only used to sound bites. We have to see the whole puzzle. That's why this is so complicated. And I think people who are against her and her husband understand our nature. We just want to be shown a simple picture. We need to see all the puzzle pictures and put all the picture puzzle together. Okay, and anyway, that's going to come out in 2019 with the trials and all of the evidence there. And today we're showing episode 1 of Avoid Dead Man Talking. If you want to have us come out to your community, you just reach out to onecowboystandforfreedom.com or centerforselfgovernance.com. We'll schedule it, come show it. Bring everyone that you know in your
Invite the
community.
media.
Invite them. Invite the media. Invite the college students. Invite the Democrats and Republicans and Independents and Libertarians. Invite them all.
Because it's not about which political party that you belong to. It's about our liberties, our freedoms, our ability to be able to speak freely in this country without fear of being murdered because you don't happen to fall politically correctly on the right side. It's not acceptable, and we have to hold them accountable. We have to hold these people accountable for what they did to my husband, because it could happen to you. It could happen to you next. And so we have to stand. We have to see this through to the end. I don't care how it turns out, but if it turns out to where they are found responsible, then we can take that and have moral authority and move forward and make some real change, because I think that there's some real change needed in our police departments, in our educating of them, in their training, the regulations. We need to roll back so many different things, and maybe I'm thinking that we can do a whole heck of a lot, but if we don't start looking at all of those things, we're not going to see a difference. We're not going to see change.
It's very awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.